Imagine a peaceful town. The sun sets, children play, neighbours chat. It seems idyllic. But this peace was often bought with a dark price. Many towns hid a chilling warning: don't let the sun go down on you here. This was the reality of sundown towns. These were places where sunset brought danger, not rest. For Black Americans and other minorities, sundown towns meant fear and exclusion. They represented a system designed to keep them in their place and out of sight. Sundown towns were more than just segregated communities. They were places where non-white people were explicitly banned after dark. This wasn't just a southern phenomenon, it was a nationwide scourge that poisoned communities across the country. These towns used various tactics to enforce their racist rules. Violence and intimidation were rampant. The history of sundown towns is a dark chapter in American history. It's a story of terror, discrimination, and the systematic denial of basic human rights. The legacy of sundown towns is still felt today. It lives on in racial disparities in housing, wealth, and opportunity. By understanding the history of sundown towns, we can better understand the roots of racial inequality in America. To understand the rise of sundown towns, we must journey back to America's colonial era. Early laws reflected this stark reality. In 1714, New Hampshire implemented a curfew specifically targeting indigenous, black, and mixed-race individuals. These early laws were part of a larger pattern of racial control. American lawmakers didn't invent racial exclusion, they borrowed it. England's poor laws, designed to control the movement of the poor, provided a convenient template for restricting black mobility. These laws served as a precursor to the economic coercion that would later define many sundown towns. The legacy of this borrowed bigotry is undeniable. The American Revolution did little to dismantle the deeply ingrained system of racial exclusion. Virginia enacted a law prohibiting freed black people from entering its borders. Northern states implemented their own forms of racial control. These post-revolution policies solidified the racial hierarchy. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, the fight for racial equality faced a new foe, Jim Crow. This system of laws wasn't just about segregation, it was about maintaining white supremacy. Schools, parks, libraries, even cemeteries were segregated. Poll taxes and literacy tests silenced black voters. Jim Crow was a carefully constructed system of oppression. While Jim Crow tightened its grip on the South, a quieter form of racism took root across the rest of the nation. Sundown towns sprouted across the Midwest, the North, and the West. These towns didn't need official laws to enforce their racial boundaries. A whispered threat or a menacing stare spoke volumes. Black families learned quickly which towns were best avoided after dark. Between 1916 and 1970, millions of black Americans fled the Jim Crow South. This mass exodus, known as the Great Migration, was fueled by hope for economic opportunity. Instead of welcoming arms, black migrants often encountered hostility and discrimination. Sundown towns played a crucial role in limiting opportunities for black migrants. The promise of the North, for many, turned out to be a cruel mirage. In the early days, sundown towns weren't subtle. Signs posted at town lines blared their message, "Don't let the sun go down on you here." These signs were backed by the full force of the law. Local police acted as enforcers, harassing any black person caught within town limits after dark. The threat of violence hung heavy in the air. As overt racism became less socially acceptable, Sundown Towns adopted new strategies. Redlining choked off the lifeblood of home ownership for black families. Social pressure played an equally devastating role. White shop owners refused to serve black customers. This pervasive discrimination created an environment where black families felt unwelcome. As the 20th century progressed, Sundown Towns refined their methods of exclusion. Zoning ordinances became weapons in the fight for racial purity. Homeowners' associations enforced restrictive covenants. This shift from overt to covert racism made it even more challenging to combat. The legacy of these tactics continues to shape our cities and towns. The perils of travel for Black Americans. For Black Americans during Jim Crow, the open road was rarely an invitation to freedom. It was a minefield of danger and humiliation. Each journey required meticulous planning and awareness of invisible boundaries. A wrong turn or flat tire could leave you stranded in a hostile town. Imagine being refused service at a gas station or turned away from a motel. The emotional toll was immeasurable. Travel was less about leisure and more about survival. This climate of fear had a profound impact on black communities. The open road was a stark reminder of the dehumanizing nature of Jim Crow. In 1936, Victor H. Green, a black postal worker from Harlem, New York, offered a lifeline to black travelers navigating this treacherous landscape. He published the first edition of the Negro Motorist Green Book, a travel guide that would become an indispensable resource for black Americans for the next 3 decades. Green's guide was more than just a list of hotels, restaurants, and gas stations. It was a carefully curated network of safe havens across a hostile nation. It identified businesses owned and operated by black and welcoming white proprietors who understood the challenges faced by black travelers and were committed to providing them with dignified service. The Green Book empowered black travelers in numerous ways. It provided them with vital information, allowing them to plan their trips with a degree of certainty and avoid towns where their presence was unwelcome. It also fostered a sense of community and resilience, connecting black travelers with black-owned businesses and creating a network of support that transcended geographic boundaries. The impact of the Green Book extended far beyond its practical use as a travel guide. It stood as a powerful symbol of resistance against segregation, a testament to the determination of black Americans to live with dignity and freedom in a nation that often denied them both. The Green Book, last published in 1966, stands as a poignant reminder of a dark chapter in American history. It serves as a testament to the ingenuity and resilience of black Americans who, denied basic freedoms, created their own networks of support and solidarity. The guide's legacy, however, extends far beyond its historical context. The Green Book reminds us that the fight for civil rights was waged not just in courtrooms and on protest lines, but also in the everyday acts of resistance and community building. It highlights the power of collective action and the importance of creating safe spaces for marginalized communities. Moreover, the Green Book's legacy resonates with contemporary struggles for social justice. It reminds us that discrimination and exclusion take many forms and that seemingly neutral policies can have a disproportionate impact on marginalized groups. The fight for equal access and opportunity, as the Green Book so powerfully illustrates, is far from over. The Green Book's enduring message is one of hope and perseverance. It reminds us that even in the face of systemic oppression, communities can come together to support one another, challenge injustice, and create a more just and equitable world. To grasp the true impact of Sundown Towns, we must confront specific examples. These were real places, etched onto maps and into the collective memory of Black Americans. Their names became synonymous with fear, exclusion, and violence. Cullman, Alabama stands as a chilling example. By night it transformed into hostile territory. The threat was implicit, a shared understanding. Cullman wrestles with this legacy today. Anna, Illinois, carries a troubling burden. The town's name, some whisper, is a chilling acronym. This saying underscores the pervasive nature of exclusion. The town's struggle reveals the enduring power of denial. Martinsville, Indiana, bears the scars of a tragedy. In 1968, Carol Jenkins was brutally murdered. Her death exposed the raw violence beneath the surface. These towns serve as stark reminders of the human cost of exclusion. Their stories challenge us to confront the enduring legacy of Sundown Towns. Route 66, immortalized in song and story as the iconic Mother Road, embodies the complex and often contradictory nature of America's past. For many, it represented freedom, adventure, and the promise of new beginnings. But for Black Americans, this ribbon of asphalt winding through the heartland was also a stark reminder of the realities of segregation and the constant threat of violence. Imagine embarking on a cross-country road trip, only to find that a significant portion of your journey is riddled with towns where your presence is unwelcome after dark. Imagine the stress of meticulously planning each stop, each gas refill, each meal, all while navigating a landscape where your safety is never guaranteed. For Black travelers, Route 66 was not a carefree adventure. It was a test of endurance and resilience. The Green Book, with its listings of safe havens and welcoming businesses, became an indispensable tool, guiding them towards pockets of humanity amidst a sea of hostility. The irony is stark. A road celebrated for connecting Americans served, for many, as a constant reminder of their isolation and vulnerability. The story of Route 66, therefore, is not just one of nostalgia and wanderlust. It's a story of segregation, resilience, and the enduring struggle for equal access and opportunity. While Black Americans bore the brunt of Sundown Town practices, it's crucial to remember that the thirst for racial purity often extended its reach to other marginalized groups. The same fear, prejudice, and desire for control that fueled the exclusion of Black communities also targeted other racial and ethnic minorities. Chinese immigrants, who played a vital role in the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad, often faced discrimination and violence in the towns that sprang up along its path. They were subjected to curfews, denied access to housing and employment, and targeted in race riots. Their contributions to building the nation were often ignored, their presence deemed undesirable once their labor was no longer needed. Native Americans, forcibly displaced from their ancestral lands and confined to reservations, also encountered Sundown Town practices when they ventured beyond those boundaries. They were met with hostility, denied service, and subjected to harassment and violence. The legacy of this exclusion continues to impact Native communities today, contributing to economic disparities and social injustices. These examples underscore a crucial point. The impulse to create and maintain homogeneous communities wasn't limited to Black-white relations. It was a broader societal problem, rooted in xenophobia, fear of the other, and a desire to preserve power and privilege. Recognizing this broader context is essential for understanding the full scope of Sundown Town practices and their lasting impact on our nation. The sun may have set on the era of explicit Sundown Town rules, but their legacy lingers like a stubborn stain. The echoes of exclusion reverberate in the stark racial disparities that still define too many communities. The fight to dismantle this legacy is a vital struggle for a more just and equitable future. The same forces that gave rise to Sundown Towns, fear, prejudice, and a relentless pursuit of power, haven't vanished. They've simply adapted, adopting new disguises and finding refuge in seemingly neutral policies. The enduring patterns of housing segregation and wealth inequality are direct descendants of sundown town tactics. Confronting this legacy requires more than acknowledging the past. It demands a clear-eyed examination of how these historical patterns shape our present. We must see how seemingly race-neutral policies perpetuate segregation and inequality. The work of dismantling the legacy of sundown towns is a shared responsibility. It requires a commitment to truth-telling and a dedication to dismantling systems of racial injustice. Only then can we create communities where everyone feels safe, valued, and empowered to thrive. The dawn of true equality remains a horizon we must strive towards together.